email. And so getting logged on to an email, we had to create an email. And then obviously, I can't be too mean. My vice president of technology isn't here, but no, he knows. And so the thing is, once we then moved on to the next step of logging onto an email, well, we had multi-factor authentication. Mm-hmm. And at the time, we had 2 of them. And so we're safer now. And so this is not a bash towards you, Arliss. But my base is, it was not a easy process of onboarding students. And so thinking that we could onboard 14 students that had never touched a computer before in their life in an hour-and-a-half period of time, not going to happen. I mean, and I say that genuinely. That we changed. The next group that we onboarded 2 weeks later, we did one-on-one. And so we made changes there. As we continue to look at like the development side of things of what we're doing with our competency-based education program. I mentioned we're the very first competency-based program in agriculture in California. There was no one that we could compare to, and specifically like the processes of what we were doing. It is a non-credit CBE program currently. There was no transcripts that we could really copy off of or use. So we had to develop transcripts, and we're still developing transcripts. We have developed a competency-based education transcript, but ensuring that, as we look at scalability of programs, we know some of the students not only will take the competency-based Ag System certificate, but they'll also take potentially a 4-credit program. And so ensuring that if students are requesting transcripts, they don't have to, we're trying to eliminate one less click for them so that if they want to request transcripts, it spits it all out onto 2 or 3 documents. That hasn't been an easy process. And so when we're looking at some of those barriers from a systematic side of things, we're still working on that. And it's we meet weekly. We have several different work groups that are part of that. When we look at the barriers for students, that's what this specific program has been all about, was how can we remove barriers for students? The process of applying to a community college in California is not simple. We have a well-being program at the college, and I applied to be a student at Merced College a few months ago. I was kind of lost, and I kind of sit back and I was like, how are my students that have never touched a computer before going to get through this? And so in some programs, the AgTech program specifically, it's very, very one-on-one with our support systems. We know that's not an option for all students, though. And so how can we cut down barriers for students? One other barrier that I want to share is, when the students get into our program and they get through their very first competency, which is digital literacy, that's a major stress for some of our students. And for some of them, once they get halfway through that, which could take roughly 6 to 8 hours, some of them, it could take 6 to 8 hours for folks that are traditional, know how to use computers, but for some of these it takes them 2-3 months. After that, they're discouraged, and they said, is this how this is going to be for the rest? And so we have support systems built in place. I have 2 dedicated student support coordinators that work with those students. They're constantly calling. They're saying, hey, I haven't seen that you've done anything on Canvas for the last 2 weeks. What's going on? Sorry, Ning. I'm in the middle of almond harvest right now. I got to take a step away. You got it. We'll call you in another month or so. Or we see students that, hey, we see you haven't done anything in the last couple of weeks. What's going on? Well, I was scared to tell you, but my computer broke. And so it allows us, those support coordinators have really allowed for us to kind of decrease some of those barriers for the students. Getting onto the college campus the very first time is daunting. And if you go to the wrong building, you go to the wrong office, for some of these students, they say, too much, I'm going to go home, not going to do it. And so I have student support coordinators that will meet the students at the local Starbucks and say, hey, follow me in. And so we've noticed that for a lot of the students, of the farm laborers, students, they need more and more support. And so, but once we get them in there and they get some success, they get through some of these competencies, they find it really, really rewarding. The one other thing is that our industry partners have fully supported their employees to be going through this program, in which some of them have guaranteed $1 to $2 more an hour a raise. And for some of those students, that's huge. For other students and other companies, they've have promised them to be on a supervisorial role or a managerial role, which, you know, that's life changing, that's family changing, and so it's an opportunity for us or for those companies to really show the support towards those students and say, hey, you know, we understand that agriculture is changing. Because it is. I mean, when we look at the costs of labor, when we talk about water efficiency, when we talk about all these things are changing. And as we look at just, you know, the harvesting equipment, where, you know, 15 years ago we were reliant upon laborers to hand pick our, you know, tomatoes or our bell peppers. Now, as we continue to evolve with AgTech, we see a lot more equipment that's being involved, a lot more autonomous equipment. But what the employers are telling us is, we don't have people that can operate that equipment now. You know, we've grown, we've invested in some of this equipment, but now what we're finding is we don't have people that can, you know, operate that equipment. And so we're essentially upskilling those farm laborers that were traditionally on their hands and knees into now operating, you know, a harvesting piece of equipment, or being able to sit behind a sorter, an optical sorter, and be able to, you know, they're able to be upskilled on something like that, and it makes them a lot more valuable, and in most cases, they're going to make more money.
I think there's a really important piece as you were talking, it kind of went through my head multiple times. It's all about working smarter, not harder. It's not taking the job away. We're just having to think differently with the work. And I think in ag, we've seen this, and even in manufacturing, we've seen it in the way of automations come in. The equipment we're using is changing. It may not be changing at the speed of, like, you know, some of the more technical worlds of, like, the microchip world. It's not going as fast as that, but it is changing. And the skill sets that are needed, some of those foundational are needed there regardless. And then you need to think about how that technology is layering on top of it. Our best mechanics come from our shop floor because they understand the equipment that they run, and then they become that qualified mechanic afterwards. I was laughing about the two-factor authentication because the other day I was trying to get SAP's Trout Conquer on my phone app working. You should have seen me. And I work in technology a lot, and I was like, it is not working. It's not going to my authenticator. It's not going to this. What am I supposed to do? And it's like, I can't go to my website because I'm not supposed to be on it, but I need to book a flight. And it was like, this is crazy. And we get that in our everyday life, and that frustration in our everyday life. It's one of the biggest things is about how to help that employee, and that barrier of how do we make it easier for them? As they're accessing this technology, how do we give them the scary help guides, I'm going to call it, rather than admitting that they don't know it? How do we give them that subtle support? So, you know, where do I get to learn about Excel and how to do a pivot table? Oh, I can stick it in ChatGPT now, yay. But how do I do it as well? Like, where are those tools? And leading them to those to help. And that's what we found ourselves in the learning function thinking about. Like, how do we pepper those in to those resistors? Or also just like, hey, this tool has some great ways to go in there and find out how to. It doesn't mean it can do it all for you. And I think that's what we've seen as industry changes. We've also seen the fear of, this is not my job. I don't know how to do it. And this is not what I know. And we've had to just support them. And sometimes it's that hand-holding just to, like, how to turn that computer on, how to navigate the screen, or as we're putting in new technology into a line, this is not removing a job. It's going to kind of make your life easier, or you're going to be doing less manual work. That was probably the biggest, as we brought in automatic depalletizers and palletizers. No longer are we manually moving stacks of glass. The robots are doing it. So now we're watching to see for the following. Now, sometimes the quality defects don't get caught quite as quickly, but it's okay. We still have to then build in those things. So I think that's it. It's really about, it's enhancing, it's not removing. And I think that's the same with AI, that's the same with, new technologies coming in. It's about enhancement. And the foundational thinking still, and the building a critical thinking when it comes to the more complex sides of it.
Thank you both so much for sharing. So many follow-up questions, but I do want to leave some time and space for the audience to see if there were any burning questions that you wanted to ask our panelists in the last several minutes we have. Please, go ahead.
I just wonder, so you talk big picture, but I'm just curious always if you would all speak to how you use AI tools in your own daily work. Is it just Copilot or email? Is anyone building Canvas? Just how does it help you all make your life easier to do the work you just described?
Yeah, I do use it. I use ChatGPT, and I'm not afraid to say I do. I encourage a lot of my other colleagues to utilize it as well, because it makes me work smarter. Obviously, I've built up the memory on some of these things, and so I've mentioned to my colleagues, just don't when you ask a question, make sure you proof it. But as the more and more I've utilized it, it makes my job much more simpler. I've been working on several different MOUs, and so being able to put a draft MOU together and then work through it on other components. I mean, it makes me, we talked about, we work a lot smarter, not harder. And so I use it every single day.
Yeah, it's funny, I used to lead the instructional design team as one of my priorities, and we talked a lot about utilization of that when we were designing training, and where do you utilize AI to create it versus not. And you can create a whole training program in AI. But you still have to go back in and make sure and validate. And I think that's what we've found is we're using it as a foundation, but it doesn't mean it's the final. We are using AI voice because that is so much easier. It's so less time consuming. When you find the AI voice platforms that work and sound real, we're there, we'll use it. And there's a couple that we've used for that where we like this AI, but we've purchased it for a month to see if we like it. And then if we like the voices that are coming through, they're not sounding robotic. I love not having to record voice, so we'll have to listen to me. I'm like, good, I don't have to walk past someone's computer where they're listening, and I'm like, oh, that's me. So it's great in that side of it. We've been able to remove, and it's reduced time for our team members. We've used it for translation for certain things, but we've been very careful because we usually want it court-appointed. But it has helped where we don't need court-appointed. And again, there's iffies around Spanish translations and the ag industry's Spanish. It's very different. I use it a lot with data, to play with data and see. Or if I've got multiple documents to summarize, like, can you find me the trends? Can you find me? Again, I still need to do some reading. So in my spare time, I guess, I do quite a lot of work for the state in different areas, and sometimes I get 150 pages to read, and sometimes just putting it in to see what the key themes are is really useful. The other day I used it to write a marketing campaign. I used Copilot to write a marketing campaign for some training courses we created, and I could literally, because my creative brain was not there, and I could literally pick the instructor guides, so the facilitator guides that have the scripts and the timing and the pictures of the slides, and ask it to pull out like key learnings or what are key business purposes behind this training, even though I kind of knew, because I knew the purpose because it was a project, but I couldn't get creative in the writing of it. It pulled pieces out for me and made me think differently around it. But it's about how you use it. And that's how I'm finding it. It's like I'm using it, but then I have to use my brain against it. Or I had one where the learning management system was dumping a load of data. And I was like, I don't have time to pivot table this into something pretty or to try and work it out. We found that if we dump it into Copilot and give it the correct prompts, it will summarize all of it. And it was fantastic. It was about movement data of team members. And I had 500 team members I was looking at movement data of. It was hurting my head. And it was about time in roles, what was their progression from A to B to C. And that did it for me much quicker than it would have taken me to do it in another way, because it was data that you had to think about, like the formatting and all of that. So I don't say I would use it 50% of my time at all, but I use it in and out as I need to. And I found I've had to get braver about it, if that makes sense. Like I've had to be like, I'm just going to try it. If it doesn't give me anything, but there are some things where I'm like, it doesn't make sense. It's quicker just to write it than it is to put it in. Whereas I know some people are putting everything in and spitting it out and then submitting, and I'm like, oh, I can tell you that's not your writing. You know, just by the way it reads, like every educator knows when they can tell for plagiarism.
I hope this email finds you well.
Yeah, exactly. Or some of the others, and I'm like, okay, this is, but I was writing something last night, and I was like, I'm not that persuasive. I wanted to make it persuasive to them. I wanted them to like recognize something. I was like, I'm going to put it in there. It was an external thing, and I was like, I want them to realize, and so I put it into a Copilot and said, summarize it for me. I love it for meetings and summaries of meetings. And we've been told, don't use Otter AI. We used to use Otter AI for a lot of focus group work and like facilitation things, and they were talking about data security. I have no idea. They're now like, go to Copilot. So that side, and I also watched a team, and this is really creative. There were a high potential group, and they were designing a product for market. They got by, here's the market we're looking at, here are the consumers we're looking at. It came up with the packaging ideas for these products. And it was amazing in what it did, and they were using ChatGPT. And it was amazing to see the designs that were coming out of it. They still needed a bit tweaking, and like one group said, oh, I can tell that was an AI image. And I was like, how? And they kind of identified a couple of things from that like demographic. But it really helped us to like think outside the box to something that's new, that's that. So I think it really depends. But I would say people are using it 25% of the time. Those that are using it more than that, there's ways of knowing that they're using it more than that. And it's reflecting. People are like, oh, I think they just stuck it in Copilot. You know, in that way. Does that help?
I'll add from my perspective at Jobs for the Future, I've sort of switched my philosophy where I used to start off with having different AI tools like Copilot or ChatGPT create a first draft, and I was realizing I was getting a lot of gobbledygook that didn't make a lot of sense. So I've started off with drafting something myself and then giving really specific commands of make it more persuasive, make it more pithy, make it for a C-level executive, put it in this voice.
I asked it to make it non-AI the other day. After it being persuasive, I said, now make it more human or less AI. It was amazing, it did it. And I was like, okay, that sounds more like me. You've taken it back from here to here. But it's almost not being afraid. Yeah. But I'm the same. I don't write the first draft in it.
Yeah.
It's the fine acting.
Yeah, that's exactly it. But I think we're coming up on time. Maybe the only thing standing between you and your break. But wanted to really share my gratitude to both Rebecca and Cody for sharing. I think this was a really insightful panel. So thank you so much. Round of applause. And happy to answer more questions if folks have them. Feel free to come up and see us.